you've heard the arguments either way on the moot. When it comes to human rights in New Zealand, the news media create more heat than light. Are the judges ready?
No.
All right.
We were told we had 5 minutes.
No problem. I'll talk a little more then. Who knows who was the New Zealand Prime Minister who oversaw the passing of that crucial piece of legislation, the Official Information Act? It was the guy we like to demonise. It was Robert Muldoon. And I think, you know, there's an irony in that because he did like to run things quite secretly, and he was a thug and his economic policies were disastrous, but he did do this one great thing towards the end of his term as Prime Minister. And I think for everyone here, journalists and communications professionals, I think that's one thing we really need to remember. I mean, we see a lot of heat and light around something like what WikiLeaks has done. I think it behoves us to remember that there is now an enormous amount of public information that tells us things we need to know. We live in a privileged age in that sense. And the fact that we can actually find out this information and we have the right to as citizens, I think is the mark of our age, and it's important. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do for the next 5 minutes. I don't have that much more to say, so hopefully the judges will be back within 3 or 4 minutes. Julie.
I'm not just some random person from the audience who has something to say. My name is Rebecca Emery and I'm from Amnesty International in New Zealand. I had a few opening remarks, but I was actually hoping that Club PR might have some sort of glee routine that they could fill in for the 5 minutes here, but nevertheless, I just wanted to say a few words about Amnesty in New Zealand, given that next year we turn 50. That's as an international movement, but we actually have been in New Zealand for nearly as long, although it's probably just in recent years with more online reach, etc., that more people are getting to know us and the kind of work that we do. Amnesty itself was born out of a newspaper article by a journalist written in 1961 by a gentleman called Peter Benenson. Benenson was so outraged at reports that a group of students in Portugal had been jailed for raising a toast to freedom in a cafe that he issued an appeal for prisoners of conscience, as they later became known, imprisoned for their beliefs. The 2 students were languishing in jail in Portugal, and it came to Peter's attention following the writing of this article that they weren't alone, that there were people languishing in jails all around the world for doing similar sort of things. Benenson called on people everywhere to join a mass letter-writing campaign to pressure governments to set such prisoners free, and that's how Amnesty was born. And many people recognise Amnesty from those early letter-writing appeals, and the power of the pen still holds strong today. With a lot of our work, even though it's developed from there, a lot of our work is to do with individuals at risk, one of who's outlined in a pamphlet put on your chairs today, an imprisoned Chinese journalist called Huang Jin-Chiao. He was actually imprisoned for some writings that he wrote outside of China when he was on a scholarship, and he's one of Amnesty's current prisoners of conscience. In terms of Amnesty's work, there's not really a week that goes past where we don't hear another report of a media worker who's imprisoned for writing down or shedding light on some of the human rights violations which are taking around the world. And it's through the bravery and courage of these kind of people that real stories come out into the mainstream. In New Zealand, we're lucky that we enjoy most of the rights that are also detailed in that plain English version of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on your seats. However, this isn't the case in many parts of the world, including one of our nearest neighbours at the moment, Fiji. Amnesty's been doing a lot of work about what's happening there and the various decrees which are being issued virtually on a weekly basis, including the media decree. 2 weeks ago, or yes, it was 2 weeks ago now, I was in Vanuatu at the Pacific Island Forum's meeting of Pacific Island leaders. The leaders were talking about a lot of things, but actually when you distill them, it seemed to be based a lot about trade and tax relief and inviting foreign investment in a lot of the Pacific Islands. What wasn't discussed were human rights violations which are happening in the Pacific, such as a huge rate of domestic violence amongst women and the Fiji situation for various political reasons. However, I did manage to speak to a number of Fijian journalists who were there reporting on the leaders' meeting, and they said anonymously that things are very tough in Fiji at the moment, and basically if they report the truth, they'll lose their jobs, at worst imprisoned. The situation is very bad, and Amnesty continues to shine a light on there, but we're always encouraging of journalists, PR practitioners, whatever it takes, to help us get word out about these kind of difficult issues. Thank you for raising the Afghanistan story. John Stevenson has kept us informed as his investigations taken place, and I was listening to him on Radio New Zealand yesterday. He's a journalist that has put in years into this particular issue. Amnesty has spoken over the months with Minister Mapp, and we've been trying to seek answers in the way that we seek answers, through advocacy and lobbying. In a way, yesterday or Sunday, when it came out in the Sunday Star Times, was a sad moment, I think, for New Zealand, that it had to admit that this could be happening. But nevertheless, the story's out there now, and I hope that, you know, New Zealand it doesn't just become yesterday's news, that the light, I'm using the phrase of the debate, continues to be shone on it, and something is done about this situation. Before you leave today, I'd invite you to visit our desk over in that corner there, and you can leave your leaflets if you choose to support the imprisoned Chinese journalist with our team here. We send those on your behalf, or you can take them home and send them too. And we're always fundraising. We don't receive any government money for our work. We rely on membership, and we have fabulous supporters, some of who have declared their allegiance today. And, you know, it's right across the spectrum as well, which is the fantastic thing about Amnesty. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech doesn't apply to just one group of people.
Can I ask a question? Is Amnesty in all countries?
Amnesty is in most countries. Yeah, not all countries, but most countries. In some countries, we actually can't form a strong movement. In the Pacific, for example, we don't have any structures, but we have members in those countries. And it was something we were talking about recently, but it's something that Amnesty grapples with. For example, if a group was to form in, say, somewhere like Fiji at the moment, it might be a situation of security or danger if people start.
No Amnesty in Fiji?
No Amnesty in Fiji. No, New Zealand and Amnesty Australia, and we have a Pacific department in London who keeps a light on there, but we do have members in Fiji, and we do support people who, through, in various ways, who are speaking out on human rights in Fiji. Yes. Anyway, I wanted to say finally, thank you very much to all of you for coming along and speaking. It's tough. I used to debate at school. I just got the willies when you started off and brought it all back. And thanks to the judges who are still absent, and for all of you for attending. Thank you. And Club PR.
Well, I guess I'm going to talk some more while the judges do their deliberation. It's been fun today. It turned into the inevitable hurly-burly between the journalists and PR people. It does strike me that it's worth saying that communications professionals are human beings too, and they no, seriously, they are. I think that a lot of people are actually unaware of the pro bono work that good PR firms do. Most people probably won't know that Ahmed Zawi, through his long struggle, was backed by a PR company on a pro bono basis who put in so much time. That was Boddicker Butler Rowden, and I'm sure there are many more stories on that side as well.
There's a deathly silence, which goes to show how important this is. Well, human rights are probably the most important thing you could debate. And I'd like to thank Amnesty for the work they've done over so many years. And from my own personal view, highlighting the plight of journalists who are working for human rights, but have had their own suspended, often indefinitely and often fatally, at the hands of those who really have no regard for rights. One of the debates, one of the speakers, I'm sorry I can't quite remember who it was, talked about rights having been earned or awarded, and I think the whole point of human rights is that they exist outside the political spectrum. It's lovely to have vigorous debate on human rights, on the media, and how well it is or isn't doing. To judge it is a pretty unenviable task, and I will get back to my boss later for turning up late and throwing me in this hot seat. And I'd like to also note that Malcolm too was asked to judge this at the last minute. But we've agreed very much in our marking. I'd like to reassure my students that assessment schedules don't normally look like that. And no, these are not for public release. But it goes like this. Points to Martin Bradbury for being as bombastic as his name suggests. To Sweeney for being as Todd as PR can be. And to Josh Gale for that pure and earnest drive that I know will take him a long way. There were points to other people as well. Certainly to Wallace for having a brain the size of 2 planets, but actually allowing us to follow his thread. Points to Robert for perseverance in the face of ridicule, which of course is every PR practitioner's skill. And points to Carrick for being brief and wearing a really natty suit.
That is true. That is true.
So our marking goes like this. To the losers, out of a potential 500 points, 424. To the losers out of 500, 402. And the winners, of course, are the affirmative team. Congratulations. We could do with a little speech.
What?
It's funny, doing a politics show, the Backbenchers show, I'm asked by my bosses increasingly not to do, I mean, I can do what I want really, but just to sort of chill out on the external activities, you know, political debates. I've been asked to do young Nats and young Act things, and a lot of debates. One thing that wasn't an option was not to do the Amnesty debate. That point that rights are always hard won and never granted is Noam Chomsky's point, and it's true the world over. Rights are always hard won by people. And Amnesty International does great work. It's great to see 50 years in New Zealand. Round of applause for Amnesty.
Yeah.
And just very finally, I didn't mean what I said about propaganda and PR like that too much.
Yes, yeah.
They do some very, very good work. Nice one. Cheers.
Oh.
Okay, well, that was really something. I'd just like to reiterate the thanks that have already been given to both the teams, especially for sticking it out even though I had kind of turned you guys upside down and put you on opposite sides of the moot than you thought you might have been. So it's been great and it was really entertaining, and I'm sure everybody agrees with me on that point.